It's the SMOD father checking in with another little video here. Welcome to Clint's Meadow of Doom. Another music discussion today. And I wanted to give my thoughts on one of the greatest subgenres of metal music. And for fans of stoner and doom and sludge, this is a genre of music that you just cannot afford to miss out on. And it's called noise rock. It's a kind of a mixture of post-punk, and it kind of came from post-punk and hardcore. And it formed in the 80s, really became big in the late 80s and 90s. Very huge, mainly in the United States. It kind of formed in the East Coast area, New York City area is kind of where it had its origins. And then it also had a big scene in the upper Midwest, in like Minnesota and Wisconsin, in like the Minneapolis area, places like that. A lot of noise rock came out of there. Noise rock was really known for what the title of the genre is, noise. You know what you're getting when you hear the term noise rock. And when you hear noise rock, it's the most chaotic, fierce, dissonant. Dissonance is big in noise rock. Atonality. Just a wash of pummeling obscurity, basically abstract art. You know, if you've ever seen abstract art, it's kind of like if you put the abstract art with all the craziness in that painting and how it seems so unorganized, and it's like you take that and you put it into music form. That's what noise rock is, and it's an absolutely amazing music, especially if you want to get some anger, aggression, if you want to get some of that out of your system. If you listen to noise rock, you'll feel a lot better. Noise rock really helps you get a lot of that stress and anger out. It's a type of music that's known for extreme, politically incorrect lyrics, a lot of offensive lyrics, a lot of aggression, violence in the lyrics, and all sorts of crazy lyrical themes about, you know, death and all the terrible things, you know. It's pretty grimy and pretty, you know, pretty real though. It's like human nature, you know. Noise rock is kind of like the primitive beast coming out. So noise rock is an absolute masterclass of heavy metal, and great for you fans of riffs and just chaotic noise and that attitude, that heavy metal attitude, which I know many stoner rock doom fans have. I mean, doom is kind of like the slowed down, and sludge is like the slowed down version of noise rock in terms of having that dark human nature, that dark despair and gloomy topics. And it's like, whereas doom and sludge is like weed, I guess you could call it weed, noise rock is basically meth, you know, methamphetamine. So I just wanted to make this video discussing noise rock and throw out some of my favorite noise rock releases and read my reviews that I've written of them, and kind of just discuss some of my favorite noise rock musicians and bands and albums. And I wanted to start off, kind of go in order of release here. Start off with Steve Albini, which is a very famous music producer, of course. He's produced so many metal and rock albums, even including Nirvana's In Utero, which happens to be their all-time heaviest and greatest album, not coincidentally. So he produced something as famous as Nirvana, but he's also known for his noise rock, and not only being a producer of a lot of noise rock, but also having several noise rock bands that he played in himself. Big Black being the first one in the early 80s. Today I wanted to talk about my favorite Steve Albini project. We're kicking the video off with Rape Man, Two Nuns and a Pack Mule, released in 1988. My favorite Steve Albini project, Rape Man, of course, with a name like that, pretty much sums up the attitude of noise rock. Very politically incorrect. I mean, you can imagine this name got a lot of controversy. Sexist and stuff like that, a lot of misogynistic claims and stuff like that. But Steve is not that kind of person. Steve is just he's a noise rock guy. He's a a guy that just doesn't care about feelings, and he just tells it like it is. He's a very brutally honest and dry individual, and perfect for noise rock and the lyrics of noise rock. I mean, the first song on this album, which is one of the best songs on the album, is called Steak and Black Onions. And that kind of sums up the album's attitude, where he sings about vegans or vegetarians and calls them plant-eating pussies. So, you know, a lot of offensive lyrics in this band. So it's absolutely great for those of us that like that sense of humor that's a little bit darker, you know. So I'll read my review I wrote in the group of this album. Everyone here should know the name Steve Albini. He's one of the most prolific music producers in metal. Known for his stripped-down style, Albini has produced famous alt-metal albums like Meantime by Helmet, and then even In Utero by Nirvana. And he's the leader of several well-known alt-noise rock groups, including Big Black, Shellock, and Rape Man. Rape Man may just be my favorite of the three, and it's their lone 1988 full-length that I'm highlighting today. Two Nuns and a Pack Mule is by far the heaviest album Albini played on. This is straight-up noise-infused hardcore sledgehammer. It's rabid and demented. The guitar screeches and Albini wails gut-wrenching vocals throughout. It's chaos and it's beautiful. The lyrics are sarcastic and tongue-in-cheek, a trademark of Albini. The opening is a troll on vegans with lyrics like, "Why don't you snuff it then, you plant-eating pussy?" It features Dave Sims of the Jesus Lizard on bass. So Mr. Jesus Lizard's David Sims plays on this album. Of course, the Jesus Lizard will also make an appearance in this video. So this is pretty much the most overlooked of all Albini projects, and you don't want to miss it. So go give it a listen. Make sure to crank it up for the full effect. Favorite tracks are Steak and Black Onions, Monobrow, Kim Gordon's Panties, and Hated Chinee. Alright, so those are really great songs. The opening track and Monobrow is really fantastic as well. A lot of dissonance in this album, lots of intensity. And Hated Chinee, a lot of great drumming, intense drumming. Noise rock has some fantastic drum bursts in it, you know, just really pummels you with the drums. So, of all the Steve Albini projects, Rape Man is the most underrated of them all, and the heaviest, the most metal of them all. Next album, of course, Jesus Lizard, Goat. A perfect title for one of the coolest albums ever. Released way back in 1990. Actually, it was released in 1991. It was recorded in 1990. The Jesus Lizard's Goat is really the goat of noise rock. It's probably the greatest noise rock album, or at least one of the top 3 greatest noise rock albums of all time. Of course, David Yao spends the entire 30 minutes wailing like a madman over pummeling riffs and distorted rhythm. Best tracks for me are Mouth Breather, Monkey Trick, South Mouth. I also really like the song Rodeo and Juliet, the closer. And Nub is really good as well. So this is just one of these albums that it's really, like most noise rock albums, it's really quick and to the point. It has about a half hour of music in it, which is very common length for these noise rock albums. They get right to the point and they pummel you with 3-4 minute type songs, and it's just no filler, no overindulgence, nothing, just straight to the point, takes all the fat off. So this is the perfect representation of that type of music, that type of album. The singer, David Yao, he's just a madman on the mic. This album has to be heard. I'm sure you've heard it, but just in case you haven't, check out the Jesus Lizard's Goat. Next is Strap It On by Helmet. I'm sure you've heard of Helmet. Helmet is a very famous noise rock band, probably the most mainstream famous example of noise rock. They've actually had one of their songs on the radio, Unsung. Of course, that you can still hear on radio stations, any rock radio station. So they got a little bit of publicity, a little bit of recognition in the mainstream. Strap It On was their debut album, released back in 1990. And Strap It On is their heaviest, most aggressive album. Very raw, Very raw album. The production on it, it's just a fuzz-drenched, chaotic noise. I mean, just pure noise, just pure sledgehammer. Very rough, very, very rough production. Of course, Page Hamilton, the lead singer and guitarist, has one of the greatest guitar tones in the history of heavy metal music. That guitar tone will just absolutely crush you. So I wrote a review of this album, so I'll read it to you. Says, today I'm blasting one of the nastiest, loudest, angriest, and most chaotic releases in metal history. It's the 1990 debut from Helmet. Strap It On. Strap It On is a noise rock classic if there ever was one. In just 30 minutes, you get taken behind the woodshed and bludgeoned to death. The album features extremely raw production, which just adds an extra layer of grime to this crusted sandwich. It has all the trademarks of 90s alt-metal post-hardcore albums. Drop D and a crashing rhythm section, schizophrenic guitar, and changing time signatures. Tortured yells from the vocalist. The whole thing adds up to a pretty frightening monster of sound. Lead singer guitarist Page Hamilton is the perfect frontman for Helmet. His raw bellows just add so much intensity. And John Strainer is one of the best drummers in alt-metal, hands down. Yes, John Strainer. Of course, the drums always have to be mentioned in noise rock. Like I said at the beginning, drumming, if you like drumming, you won't get any better than in noise rock. The noise rock drummers just pummel you every time. It's just so intense. I mean, he just pummels your face into the ground. Helmet would go on to release their magnum opus Meantime 2 years later. Strap It On is a solid debut that deserves credit for its influence on the genre. You really can't go wrong with any of the first 4 Helmet records. They're simply one of the best bands in alt-metal. Don't miss out on these guys any longer. Strap It On today. Favorite tracks are Rude, Sinatra, FBLA, and Blacktop. And shout out to Murder as well for being one of the heaviest album closers of all time. Murder, if you listen to the closer, oh my God, it just absolutely destroys you. I mean, there's no breathing on an album like this, but Murder just, you know, if you have a good stereo system, blast Murder and it will just rip your house apart or your car apart, wherever you're listening to it. Murder is just some of the heaviest shit you'll hear. So, of course, we know that Meantime was released as well in 1992, a couple years later. This is their most famous record. Definitely had their big hit Unsung on it. Sold quite a few copies. I will say that Unsung, though, is not one of their better songs. It's just not. I'm sorry. It's probably actually one of their worst songs. So Unsung, of course, is the big radio hit, and it's their most mundane song, their most boring song. It's not like a bad song in terms of radio metal, like music you'll hear on the radio. Compared to a lot of stuff you'll hear on the radio, it's pretty good. But this album, really, the meat and potatoes of this album are songs like Ironhead, an absolutely pummeling track, Turned Out, which is one of the best Helmet songs of all time, and it has a great closing suite of songs. FBLA 2 and Role Model closes the track out with 2 of the best songs on the album. So Helmet's Strap It On and Meantime are their 2 best and heaviest releases. I also have their albums Betty and Aftertaste, 3rd and 4th albums. After the 4th album, they really changed and were not anywhere near what they were before that. But, you know, the first 4 Helmet albums, oh yeah, definitely get those. Next band, Fudge Tunnel, a very underappreciated band. This is called Hate Songs in E Minor. This is their debut album. Okay, this was released back in 1991 on Earache Records. Earache was one of the good, you know, one of the record labels that released a lot of noise rock. Hate Songs in E Minor features one of the greatest guitar tones of all time. Okay, truly, I mean, other than stuff like Helmet with Page Hamilton, this is the greatest guitar tone captured on this album. I mean, the guitar tone is just, I can't even describe how great it is. But it just is so crunchy and just purely sledgehammer. I did write a review of Hate Songs in E Minor, so I can read that to you. Today, I'm pummeling my skull with their 1991 debut, Hate Songs in E Minor. It was released on the fantastic Earache Records. Fudge Tunnel is simply one of the heaviest bands you'll come across. They're a sonic assault with a sledgehammer. Hate Songs is a perfect title for this one. This is one angry, mean, and nasty album. Features one of the best guitar tones ever laid to tape. It's absolutely massive. The vocals are about what you'd expect, abrasive and filled with hate. The album is worth the price of admission for the opening track alone. So the opening track is, of course, Hate Songs. Definitely probably the greatest Fudge Tunnel track of all time. It's if there was one Fudge Tunnel track that sums up the band, Hate Songs is that song. So if you listen to Hate Songs and don't like it, you're not going to like Fudge Tunnel, but that song is just an absolutely incredible song in particular. This isn't even their masterpiece. They'd get even heavier and angrier for their third and final release, 1994's The Complicated Futility of Ignorance. And that one is also a must-own. Don't sleep on these metallic monsters anymore. The favorite tracks are Hate Song, Kitchen Belt, Soap and Water, and Tweezers, which are the songs that probably have the best guitar tones on the nastiest guitar tone on them. That's what you listen to Fudge Tunnel for that guitar, that tone, that crunch. Of course, I mentioned this album, their third album, and actually their final album, also released on Earache Records. And the album artwork is, of course, exactly what sums it up pretty well. This guy is very angry, brutal looking, It's like Disturbed, only good. If you've ever seen Disturbed's album covers, like The Sickness, this is like Disturbed, but only really actually very good, solid metal music. This was released in 1994. Has song titles like Random Acts of Cruelty, The Joy of Irony, Suffering Makes Great Stories, Circle of Friends, Circle of Trends. I would say it's just as good as Hate Songs in E minor. I may like it even more as an overall album, but I do think Hate Songs has their best overall guitar tone and their best song, the self-titled track Hate Song, I think is their best track. But this may be a better album as a whole. It's definitely right up there. So Fudge Tunnel, kind of a more underappreciated band, I think. They don't get quite as much recognition as they deserve. I don't hear them talked about enough. Certainly compared to Helmet and the Jesus Lizard, they don't get talked about a whole lot. So Fudge Tunnel, awesome band name, Fudge Tunnel. I mean, you hear that and you're just like, this band's got to be interesting. Noise rock was known for having some pretty good band names. Okay, this one is another underrated one, Cherubs. Their release, Heroin Man. All right, Heroin Man. One of the all-time best noise rock albums, for sure. Underappreciated. It was released back in 1994. This is not the original album artwork, by the way. The album artwork originally has a photograph of an actual person who is in a bathtub, and it's a pretty filthy, politically incorrect album cover. Very violent. This is the re-release, which was a $5 CD I got from, of course, the great Amphetamine Reptile Records. Now, Amphetamine Reptile Records, that is the record label for noise rock. If you go to their site or just look them up and look at all the stuff that they've put out, and you just go through it and listen to it, you'll get pretty much the most comprehensive, best catalog of noise rock. If you just go through all their bands, their whole roster of releases, you'll find 50 great noise rock releases, minimum. So they released this one, and it was a $5 CD. They do have $5 CD deals on their website, I believe, to this day. So you can get some really great noise rock on there. This is probably one of the best albums they ever put out as a label, though. Really heavy, of course, for noise rock. You know that's what it's going to be. I did write a little review of it. In My Stereo Today is one of the meanest noise sludge hardcore albums of the 90s. You get huge points if you know this obscure underground nasty. Heroin Man by Cherubs was unleashed back in 1994. This album was recently re-released by the classic Amphetamine Reptile Records, and you can get it for $5. I don't know if that's probably not You probably can't get it for $5 anymore. This was back in 2017 when I bought it. From beginning to end, this album is unrelenting and completely undervalued. And of course, my favorite tracks are Stag Party, Animator, Dave of the Moon. Dave of the Moon is probably their most famous track and kind of like their anthem, probably their most accessible song. They have some politically incorrect stuff. Coon Ass is one of this songs. The Big Groovy and Worn Out Balls. Those are all really, really fantastic songs. Some of them are instrumental, like The Big Groovy. The singing is not everybody's cup of tea. I will tell you that right now. Vocal work on a lot of these noise rock bands, the vocal work it's kind of it can be a little bit brazen. It can be a little bit abrasive, and you're listening to noise rock for the riffs, for that noise, that dissonance, that chaotic noise and pummeling guitar, and the drum work as well. For those of us that like our music filthy, grimy, and definitely unconventional. Not the type of stuff you put on. This is not the type of stuff you put on for Mother. You don't play it at a family get-together, Thanksgiving, whatever. And I'm just going to wrap the video up by talking about Unsane, another band that is a very legendary noise rock band. From New York, I believe, which is where a lot of the noise rock really formed. Again, released on Amphetamine Reptile Records. Of course, the album artwork, a bloody friggin' sheet with a hammer next to it, a sledgehammer next to it. So, of course, very violent. Very, very typical of noise rock. Violent themes. This is probably the best Unsane album, I would say. If you had to get one Unsane album, I would get this one for sure. Especially the first half of the album. Scrape, Alleged, Blame Me, Out, Can't See, Blue. Those are really the meat and potatoes of the album. It closes with a fantastic track called Swim. Today I want to talk about a little group called Unsane, who happen to be completely insane. These guys are from New York City and formed back in the late 80s. And they soon became a pioneering force in grimy noise rock. Their sound is like a freight train bearing down on your head. They're quite honestly one of the heaviest bands out there. Today I'm highlighting what I consider one of their crowning achievements, the 1995 Noise Attack classic, Scattered, Smothered, and Covered. The album unleashes a fury of skull-crushing riffs and agonizing wails for its entire quick 35-minute runtime. You barely have time to catch your breath. This is seriously intense stuff. Unsane is easily one of the most intense bands of all time. The first half of the album is particularly strong, and it's classic after classic. Chris Spencer is just fantastic behind the microphone. His intensity is rarely matched. These guys continue to release great material over 20 years later. For another Unsane high point, check out 2007's This Queen. Probably their second best album, This Queen. So those are the bands that I have on CD. The noise rock that I have on CD. There's lots of noise rock albums, bands that I want to get that I haven't gotten a hold of yet. Carp is one. Carp is a great band from Washington. And they actually had Jared Warren, who would later join Melvins and work with them on a couple albums. Carp released a few albums in the 90s. 1997's self-titled album, which had Bacon Industry as an opening track, and boy, that album is really great. I need to find the self-titled and buy it. It's ridiculous that I haven't gotten that one yet. So Carp, check them out as well. Cows, a band called Cows. You may have heard of them. They're kind of a famous noise rock band that's pretty well known. They released some pretty great noise rock albums in their early history in the late 80s and early 90s. My favorites being Daddy Has a Tail in 1989, as well as Effete and Impotent Snobs, released in 1990. Again, these were all released on Amphetamine Reptile Records, of course. Cows deserve to be heard, but I haven't gotten a hold of any of their albums on physical format. But definitely the early Cows, another band from Minneapolis. As I said, they have a big scene of noise rock. Another one from Minneapolis is Hammerhead's Into the Vortex, released in 1994. That's a fantastic record. I've been trying to track that down on CD, and I think I've got a beat on it. I should be able to get it purchased pretty soon. The album is particularly good towards the end of the record, such as Double Negative, Empty Angel, and Journey to the Center of Tetanus 4, their closing track. Just some fantastic guitar work. Beautiful, beautiful guitar work on this album. The album artwork is really great. It's very stoner rock looking, space rock looking, with an astronaut on it. So check out Hammerhead Into the Vortex. And of course, last band I'll mention is Killdozer. Killdozer is another band. This time they're from Wisconsin instead of Minnesota. They released some really great noise rock records, peaking in the late 80s with Little Baby Button and 12-Point Buck in 1987 and 1989. Those two records are, you can actually get a double CD with those two records on it. I've almost bought that a couple different times. You can get two of their best albums in one package, one double CD release. So those are really good noise rock albums. Definitely a very unconventional band. The singing is just, I mean, even more abrasive and even more out there than even other noise rock bands. Killdozer is pretty advanced level in terms of its craziness. Pretty much my favorite noise rock bands, and I hope that this video was interesting and you maybe learned some things. Go check out these bands and their albums, and tell you, noise rock, it gets the SMOD seal of approval. Thanks for watching my noise rock presentation. I will talk to you soon. Doom on, everybody.